I'm humbled to be sitting here with you and humbled by what you've done for this country, for this world. Mr. Gray, I'm humbled by what you have done to inspire me. You'll remember that when I was an LDF lawyer, I shared with you that I first learned about you when I was a high school student in Denver. And I learned about your mission to use your legal degree to destroy everything that was segregated.
I was born December 14th, 1930. And during my entire childhood and my educational process, everything was completely segregated. When I was a teenager, I saw there were problems that we were having in Montgomery on the buses. So I decided I would become a lawyer, not just any kind of lawyer, but I wanted to help solve the problems. And on September the 7th, 1954, I was admitted by the Alabama Supreme Court to practice law in Alabama, and I've been practicing ever since. And as of that date, I was then ready to begin destroying everything segregated I could find, but I still didn't tell anybody about it. Not even my own family didn't need to know all of what I had in mind, because if I had told people that I was going to go to law school, become a lawyer, and destroy everything segregated I could find, I never would have been admitted to the Alabama Bar Association.
And what was your first case as part of your pursuit to destroy everything segregated?
It was really the state of Alabama versus Claudette Carvin. Claudette Carvin was a 15-year-old girl who was arrested en route from school going home. She wasn't seated in the seats that were reserved for whites. She was arrested and called the parents, and they retained me to represent her. She was charged with being a delinquent. Well, Colette was not a delinquent. As a matter of fact, she was an honored student. And I told them that the real reason they arrested her was to enforce the segregation laws, because they didn't want to charge her with that, because they didn't want anybody to have an opportunity to question the constitutionality of it. What I learned was there were people in Montgomery at the time, E.D. Nixon, Joanne Robinson, the Women's Political Council, the NAACP, were all interested in doing something about solving these problems.
You represented Rosa Parks.
About 3 or 4 days a week, Ms. Parks would usually come and we would discuss problems in our communities. We talked about Claudette's case, and we talked about what a person should do if they decided that they were in a position where they were asked to get up and they didn't want to get up. I found she had been arrested, and I told her I would get her case ready and get back in touch with her. If we're going to do anything community-wise, now is the time to do it. We were going to definitely try to ask the people to stay off the buses.
And so that bus boycott was supposed to last one day. How long did it ultimately last?
Well, it ended up lasting 382 days. The first meeting was held at Dexter Avenue Baptist Church on that Friday evening, and finalized the details, and people refused to ride the buses on Monday, and we had Ms. Parks' trial and had the meeting at Holt Street Baptist Church and introduced Dr. King to the nation, and the rest of it is history.
Now, you represented Claudette Colvin, Rosa Parks, and you also represented a young pastor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Can you say a word about your relationship with Dr. King?
Well, because Dr. King was the spokesman for the group, and I was a lawyer. We were in touch with each other on a day-to-day basis, because I had to let him know what the law was. So if they were going to do something that violated the law, I needed to know about that, so we'd be prepared to do whatever needed to be done on it. So throughout that whole over a year, we represented Dr. King on a day-to-day basis, and I was his first lawyer in the civil rights movement.
Another of your cases involved protecting the rights of the civil rights marchers over the Edmund Pettus Bridge to get to Montgomery.
In 1965, they decided that they would have a march from Selma to Montgomery, go to Judge Wallace to ask for his assistance in connection with voter registration. They decided to start doing that on what has developed into be Bloody Sunday. John Lewis was included in it, and they wanted to know if I would come over to Selma because they wanted to march from Selma to Montgomery, but they didn't want to be beaten again. Before the close of day on Monday, following Bloody Sunday, we filed the case. It's expedited, and the court ended up ruling that we were entitled to march from Selma to Montgomery, and the state of Alabama should protect them. It was able to be done, and it was an impetus in getting the Voting Rights Act of 1965 passed. And all of those things collectively came together and resulted in President Obama being elected to be president twice.
So I read an article that talked about a conversation you had with the late John Lewis. He gave you some words of encouragement before he passed. And one of his last, as you know, one of his last stops was at Black Lives Matter Plaza in Washington, D.C. And so I'd love for you to share a word about John Lewis, what he said to you, what it meant to you, and then if you can just connect sort of this moment to the Black Lives Matter movement and its importance in advancing this work.
Well, you know, back in 1958, John Lewis came to Montgomery at the invitation of Martin Luther King. So we kept in touch with each other over the years, and then I represented him in the Freedom Ride case when he was beaten back, John Lewis versus Greyhound. Then I represented him in the Selma to Montgomery March case. And just a few days before he passed, he had his people to call me and we had a conversation. He knew that he wouldn't be with us long. And I asked him, what do you want me to do? And he says, brother, keep going, keep moving, and keep the record straight. I think he would say that to whether you call it Black Lives Matter, or whether you want to call it Black Power. And I think that's the message that he would leave to us, is the message he left for me. And I'll continue to do what I can as long as the Lord permit me to do it.